Go.
How will we go? Great. Hello, everyone. So, when I was trying to create this presentation and I was trying to do the rehearsal, I was like, okay, it's a presentation that I like, so I need to find a very good intro. So I was like, trying this, no, it's already been done, try that, no, and then it hit me. I had to do the best intro ever. So, I'm making it about myself. So I'm here. I did the most unique thing that I represented nowadays. So a couple of things about me. I'm a software engineer at Vite. I'm also a tech ambassador at Code. Yes, these are two different companies. I'm also starting a new thing right now. I'm a co-producer on a podcast called Controlled Life, along with my friend Kyriakos. For now, it's for native speakers, for Greek native speakers, so you can give it a try if you want. I would love to get your feedback about this. On the right, you can see what AI thinks about me nowadays, because AI is a hot topic. I couldn't resist for the trend. You see, after ChatGPT updated the memories, it collects everything about that knows about you and tries to create an image. Just to tell you that it goes right the dog, but it's different breed, and that I like a futuristic setup, which I don't have. But yeah, the rest is just hallucination. So, something. Let's dive into without further ado. Let's dive into our story today. Today we're going to get along with a journey about upgrading a project that was built in 2017 from Webpack to Vite. So every great story needs four things for me: a hero, a villain, a journey, and a plot twist. Let's test that along our way. Our story starts more than 6 months ago, where my team assigned in a customer that was a fintech company with a huge project. We were like for 2 months there, creating analysis for products. How can we modernize their stacks? How can we get some loads from builds and bundlers? And every time our journey leads back to one project. For the presentation, we will call it Project Zero. Now, when I was conducting my report, we need to refactor a lot of things in Project Zero. I was sure that in no way in the upper management, no one will certify this. No one will tell me, okay, get the time you need, get everything you need, just do the refactoring. Because it was a very core project, and every other project was building on top of it, so the risk was high. So one day, it was I think a Wednesday, my team leader burst into my office and he's like, "You will never believe it. What happened today? I got the good to go. We're good to go for the project. We're good to go for Project Zero and upgrade it to it. Do all the modernized stuff that you imagine, everything, all the project from the analyze. But there was only one catch. There's always cuts. And he was like, okay, I made some discounts in our time. You ask for 2 months, you get 2 weeks. You ask for 2 months and possibly go to 2 months and a half, you get 2 weeks. Okay, so we were like 5 developers, all front end, trying to do parallel stuff. So we're like, everything happens. But why everything is happening? I mean, like, why when you ask something, you never get whatever you want? But you get, we get what we get. So without further ado, let's roll up our sleeves and dive into our project. Right now, the project in the state before the transition to Vite, it was active on daily basis. We were like 1.1 million daily concurrent users globally in 10 or 12 countries at the time. These users create like 2.2 million microtransactions daily. Development teams, about like 10 front-end developers who were actively working on that project, create new features every week. The project was built in 2017. And just a note that this project started 7 years ago, like a POC, okay? Like a proof of concept about what the project could do with using the Vue.js framework. Let's dive into the stack. The project was built with Vue 2 in version 2 these days. Now it's in version 3. They used to have Vuex for store pattern. For those that coming from React, it's similar to index. Of course, they had Webpack, just for unit tests, and this is where the good stuff starts. They had an SCSS framework, all of it custom-made from the design team, from core variables to themes to functions to media queries. Everything was handmade. No UI framework at the time, no Bootstrap, no nothing. During the years, some developers added Tailwind in order to have some comfort doing some stuff. The project contained more than 220 dependencies, dev dependencies and normal dependencies, and it was built with Node 40. Now, I told you that we were a front-end team, but I already included PHP on play because the project was built using a custom server-side rendering. And we will talk about this in the future. So I'm trying to settle the stage for what we had to face. Now, the first battle that we had to fight was upgrade the project from Node 14 to Node 20. I know that right now, 6 months ago, the LTS for Node.js was like version 22, but there was some conflicts with DevOps teams, and they asked that the higher we can go was Node 20. From Node 14 to Node 20, it's like 7 years of new things on the engines. Everything was brand new, actually. But we give it a try. I told you that we had 220 packages that we had to upgrade. Of course, we didn't do all by hand. At first, many of these packages were out of order, or obsolete, or no one used them anymore. Did I mention that the project was legacy? No, sorry. Our project was a legacy project, but there are always new features about it. The code was legacy, the stack was legacy. So a lot of packages were out of order. Some of them could not upgrade to Node 20. The developers, because they were open source, developers dropped the support out of them, and we were stuck in old versions, but we could not upgrade to Node 20. So what we had to do is just delete everything that was out of order at first. Then we had to specify to delete all the Webpack related packages because we were in transition to Vite, and all the Bell packages because Webpack uses Bell and Bell presets about this, but Vite doesn't. So at first we cleared the clutter a bit. We managed to get the packages to 100 and something. So the rest were like code that we didn't use. So at the end, we had to mark some unsupported packages and then find the new ones and replace them. Now, someone could ask, how did we do that? How did we manage to solve all these things about Node packages? With an answer technique of try and error. If you can imagine, and at least when I heard about try and error, I imagined someone smashing his head on a wall and betting that the wall will track faster than his head. So this is what we did. We're just upgrading something on the project, but it fails. One. And this stuff all for packages. Next up, we have the custom server-side rendering. On your right, you can see the mental health of my team at the time. Flames everywhere, people were cursing, bursting stuff. So we had to deal with custom server-side rendering. Remember, it's 2017. There is no next, nothing. So when people want to get ahead for SEO, they just have to create, if they're running on PHP, an index.php file, host your file there, your project there, and when they want some data to be on board before the rendering, then they just inject the data to the DOM. Nice. A lot of security concerns about this, but it was a way. So our fellow developers 7 years ago decided that this was a good idea, so they tried to inject data directly on the DOM and then use them before the initial render. So the SEO crawler could be on time. Now, they use PHP for that, but if any of you have already worked with Vite, you will realize that Vite doesn't like anything else besides HTML pages. Okay? Normally, in a project, in a front project, you have an index.html, which is cool. There's no PHP, no C#, nothing. So we had to delete the whole index file, create a new one called index.html, and try to migrate everything that we could. Now, in this server-side rendering stuff, that they created. They also had some third-party libraries, scripts, log rocket stuff, or stuff that monitored the user about their behavior. Everything that they needed to do, they just inject it on the DOM in this page. So we have to make a huge transition from this file to the other, from PHP to HTML. But we must do that by smashing our heads to the wall again. And then the next battle was the custom design system that I told you before. You see, when you start to create something, especially the less experience you have, you will find yourself create something new. For example, I want to build something. I find a library. It's not 100% customizable to what I want. So what's the better way? I'm a developer. I can do it. Imagine to be a builder and not be able to build a wall for your house and buy a wall. No, I will create a wall for my house, right? No. Or you can do it if you have your own project. When you're in a company-wide project, enterprise-wide project with a potential scalability in mind, then custom is good, but not always the solution. So our friends there decided to create a whole of SCSS variables, snippets, queries, functions, video queries, whatever. It was a gem, but it was custom. Okay, so there is a problem about this customization. Vite supports SCSS out of the box. You can just type write your SCSS code, and Vite will transpile it to Sharp and to CSS, and you will have it in your project. But in order to do so, it creates what you can see in your screens as the code snippet. You have to add it in additional data of something called preprocessor options. Essentially, this means that if you have any variables in SCSS that must be resolved before the rendering, then you must pass them as a file for the Vite to understand and transpile them. You cannot do this on the fly. With Webpack, it's easy. Just import your file, everything will work magically. But here, we had to split our design system into. At first, we had all the variable stuff, variables, functions, etc. And then we have to have all the styles, the blocks styles, directly injected in our components. So this was another thing that we had to face. Eventually, we split their system in half. Half was passed as preprocessor options, and the other half injected directly into the components. Another battle for us. Now we have some minor stuff. Something that I didn't know, and I first encountered this project, is that in Webpack, you could input colors in SCSS file directly and use them as JSON objects. Personally, I just saw them here for the first time. It's one way to do it. Okay, so our friends there tend to do that a lot. Whenever they need a color to translate it from SCSS to CSS variable, then they just use this method. They just import a file. Webpack did the magic for them, and then they can just use an object and get the color from that object. Okay? Guess what? It doesn't work this way. So, thankfully for us, the fix here was very simple. We just had to use a flag in Vite called export, where you inform Vite that, okay, this is an SCSS file, nice, but I want you to translate it in JSON for me. So, thankfully, this was worked well for us, no fire here. Next, we have the SVGs. At the project, we had all this that they wanted to use SVGs directly into the code to avoid bringing assets during the build. So in Webpack, we had to require, but this had to change because we require something Webpack specific and not Vite specific. So new URL come into place, but new URL has its limitations. It's a browser feature and not a Vite feature, which means that Vite doesn't compile anything inside your new URL. So any dynamic paths, any variables, they're just not recognizable. So this would not work. Either this would not work, but glob pattern would work perfectly. So we had to translate everything that the users require to new URL using the glob pattern. Next up, moment, of course. You don't have a 2017 project without having moment for anything there. So yeah, there was one more patient there. The main problem with moment that we faced was that we wanted some localities based on the country that the site was built for. A different locality for Greece, different locality for US. Nice, moment supports that. But what moment doesn't support is the async import with dynamic variables, because yet again, they use global pattern. So we could not just simply use this, where we can inject the country code into the import. We had to move in a solution like this, where we had to create a bunch of if-else statements, unfortunately, in order to cover all the cases where we had a different country code. Yeah, we find this with the pottery again. Now, web workers. It was a huge surprise for me that the web workers created. I thought that the web workers was not created before 2017. Yeah, it means that they had web workers in 2017. They used it for heavy stuff and to handle data from sockets. They were using Webpack loaders, like the syntax you see on your screens, in order to use the dynamically workers inside. Thankfully, Vite supports that also using the new URL and the type module, and we got this part fixed too. Now, custom plugins. Of course, there were custom stuff, because I mentioned like 3 custom stuff until now. And there are more custom plugins in Webpack, where they use them for essentially copying files. They write custom Webpack plugins to copy files after the build and move it directly to the PHP site, or export icons and feed them to CDNs. So thankfully, Vite also support that out of the box for us. Either way, some other developers had already the same issue, so we get the plugins, or Vite provides a very easy documentation and very helpful documentation to create your own plugins. Now, Storybook. Of course, there were Storybook. But when we thought that Storybook would kill us or something, because Storybook is based heavily on Webpack, thankfully, Storybook team is very active, and after version 0, if I'm not mistaken, they upgraded their whole stuff from Webpack, and they support Vite now. So we delete everything from Storybook there. We upgrade to version 6, to version 8, and we have this beautiful code snippet when you can inject your own configuration into Storybook configuration and do all the changes you need with Vite, and no Webpack on the way. Now, of course, I told you that the stack had Jest. From Jest, we decided, no one forced us, we wanted to do this with ourselves, and go from Jest to Vitest. Okay, because we wanted more better times for our tests. And can you imagine how this was? Seamless. It was the big surprise of the room that the transition from test to Vite was seamless. Okay, yes, we had to create some changes in the code, but no fire there too. Now, the good news about this transition was that bundle size reduced by 30%. Load times of the initial render of the project is reduced by 50%. Load times during the save and the hot module reloading when the developer can save, and the time needs for Webpack to spile everything, reduced by 70% with Webpack. The tests run faster thanks to Vitest. And of course, the developer's happiness increased by 20%. This is actual metrics. So, the lessons we learned from this transition is don't trust your manager about timing. No, I'm just kidding. Is that whenever you want something to be done, of course, you will not have the time you want, but the time you get. Now, Vite is not a silver bullet. It cannot do anything yet. For me, it was a very nice experience. It was a very nice journey. I realized that Webpack used to do a lot of magic things under the hood that you didn't realize, create a lot of bad patterns if actually, because of these magic things, let developers follow some not so good patterns during their code development. The best lesson and the best advice that I would give to anyone who wants to do the same is analyze your project. Do all the analysis, everything you need to do. We spent like 2 weeks to analyze and 3 weeks to develop. So a lot of these were not so much of surprise, or more like expected. Read your docs. Your docs is your friend. They have very good documentation.